In this video, we're going to have a look at enabling and configuring the income features. So we start up at your features. We click on the income feature. The first thing we'll look at is this setting here. So if we enable invoicing, we then have other options that are linked to recording invoices. Once you switch this setting on, the wizard will display all the tabs that you need to configure in order to use this feature. First thing you might want to do is update your company information, because this information will appear on the invoice. If you haven't done it already, you've got the opportunity to load your company logo. When you create an invoice, it can have a draft status until it's been finalized. You can change this terminology. So for example, you might want to call that pro forma, which is sometimes used in the construction industry. Down here, you've got the option to enable automated invoice numbering. This means that as you create invoices, it'll automatically number the invoices and make sure that each invoice has got a unique invoice number. If you enable this, then you've got the option to include a prefix on the invoice, and you've also got the option to have a starting number. So if you're already using another system and your last invoice is, say, invoice 596, you can actually go in and input that in here and carry on the invoice number sequence. Another thing to note is you can include zeros to always have a 4-digit number or a 5-digit number, or whichever you prefer, depending on the volume of invoices that you create. The other thing to look at are the terms and conditions. So these will appear at the bottom of your invoice. Many customers include their bank details in here to make it easy for customers to pay the invoice. And you can also have additional notes on the invoice as well. It's important to note that these are only default settings. So when you go to actually create an invoice, it copies these two values into the new invoice, and you can edit them on each invoice. You can also have specific terms and conditions for each contact. If the system detects on a given contact different terms and conditions, it'll put those into the invoice instead. If you want to email an invoice, you can format the email here. So for example, you've got anything inside a square bracket is a variable. So this would have your company name, invoice, and the invoice reference. So that's what would appear when the email appears in your customer's inbox. And then you can have dear customer name. Then you can have any text you want in here, yours sincerely, and it'll input all of your company details that you entered in here. It'll copy those into the invoice. Again, when you go to email an invoice, it'll give you the option to personalize the email further. And finally, as with all of the features, clicking on the training tab will display a video tutorial explaining how this feature works. So going back to the start, if we click back here and we click on save and we click on the dashboard, so we can create an invoice or we can record a cash sale. So let's talk about the difference. In a lot of businesses, people issue an invoice and then they record a payment at a later date. However, there's the concept of a cash sale. So imagine if you were managing an art gallery and someone just bought a painting, then you can record that as a cash sale, i.e. you're creating the invoice and you're recording the fact that it's been paid at the same time. There's other things we can do with this. If you just wanted to record your income. So if you were in a restaurant or a pub, you can hide the invoice button because you'll never issue invoices. And you can enable the cash sale, but you might want to override the label. So you may wish to call that takings. I've now got a very simple way to record my takings. So every time I record a cash sale, which we're now calling takings, it would create the invoice and the matching payment. Go back here again. We can switch off this feature. We can leave that visible. A lot of small businesses don't use credit notes, but if you want to issue a credit note, then you can enable this feature as well. I now have a list of credit notes. Configuring the income, whether you want to record simple invoicing, whether you want to record cash sales, and you might want to rename it, or you may not, or if you want to enable credit notes, all of that is done via your features by clicking on the income and then just by updating these tabs. And that's how you configure the income features within this app.